Hey everybody, welcome to my home. My name is Logan and this is Watch Me Work. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be replacing a water pressure switch for a well pump system. Now I've gone ahead and gathered all the tools for this. There's not a whole lot of tools required. This is actually kind of an easy job. What you'll need is a screwdriver. I looked at all these screws and they all have the option to use a standard flathead screwdriver on them, so that's what I'm going to use. And I got the new switch and I checked what size this bolt underneath here, or this fitting. This fitting is it's a 19 mil. I want to say that works out to be somewhere around 5/8 or 11/32 maybe. Sorry, not 11/32, 11/16 in standard, but anyway, it's a 19 mil. Another thing I also did, you may not have to do this, but I opened it up and I looked inside at these adjustment nuts here, and I sized those out, and these guys are a 9 mil, which I think the standard equivalent of that is 5/16. Yeah, about 5/16. It's pretty small. It's a little bit smaller than a 3/8. 5/16. Yeah. Anyhow, my math isn't going on so well in my head right now, but all we're going to be doing is we're going to be replacing this old switch with this new one. So the main things you have to do when you're replacing these, obviously, you're going to want to kill power. Now on the wall, just over there, I've got a great big switch that connects to this, and it's really easy. I've disconnected it already. Once you've disconnected your water pump electrically, then you're going to want to open up some of the taps in your house so that you can drain as much pressure out of the system as you can before the next step. Now I turned on the tap in my bathtub, and this is the best I could do here. There's still going to be a good amount of pressure in here. I don't know if you can see it, but on the gauge here, and you probably can't, it's currently showing about 40 psi. Now if this tank is pre-charged correctly, they should be charged to about 28 psi for this switch. This is a 30 to 50 psi switch. They also come in smaller sizes. I want to say it's 20 to 40, but I like a little bit more water pressure, so I went with the bigger switch. Now that we have the system as drained as we can, the next thing you're going to want to do is turn off the water supply to your home, and that will keep any of this water from rushing back, or prevent anything from contaminating your lines. This is just an easy step that we got to do. The next thing we have to do is we're going to drain as much of the water out. I got this gross bucket here with like dead spiders and shit in it. We're going to drain as much of this water as we can. Now that this is off and the pump is off, we're going to drain this. There's going to be a few buckets of this at least. So we'll open that up all the way. We'll let that finish draining our tank here. Now while that finishes draining, I'm gonna go get an air chuck with a pressure gauge on it to verify the pressure of this tank is correct, so that I know where to set my pressure switch in the future. So as you can see, I went and got this, just my air hookup. I'm gonna have to empty this bucket as well. It's getting quite full. There's a lot of water in the system. Bit of a waste of water to drain it like this, but you can't really reuse this, so maybe to water your plants. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the camera off. I'm going to finish draining this and we'll come back to this. Alright, so we've got all the water drained out of this tank. We've got this closed. We've got this valve closed. Everything should be ready to go. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our tire gauge and I'm going to check the pressure in this blue tank because it should be around 28 psi. Now, there's a problem with my tank, and the problem being that it shows 0 psi. Luckily, it's easy enough to fix. It's just a standard air valve. So I'm going to use just a regular old bicycle pump, and I'm going to bring this thing back up to around 28 psi. There's a diaphragm inside of these tanks, so it shouldn't matter if these are open or not, but you have to make sure that the tank is drained before you put air into it, otherwise you won't get an accurate reading. So we're still getting 0 psi here. I can hear air entering the tank, so I know that it is getting in there, but why is it not staying pressurized? Well, there's definitely air in there. I can hear it hissing out, so I won't give up just yet. Maybe this just requires a lot of air. Now, this is a big tank. It's a 20-gallon tank, so it's entirely possible that this just might take a while. So I'm going to turn the camera off so you don't hear me pumping this stupid thing. And I'll come back to this when it's ready. Whew, okay. Now that we've got all the physical work done and I'm sweating, I've pumped up the tank to 25 psi. The book calls for 28. I went with 25 because I figured it's close enough, and I don't know how accurate that is. You don't want to pump it up too high, otherwise your water pressure switch will never actually kick on, and then the whole thing won't work. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to start taking the old one off. This is fairly easy, really. You get the cover off. Underneath the cover, there's some electrical connections. There's 2 black, 2 white, and you can't really see them here, but there's some grounds in the back. This This is a pretty easy part. You just have to take the wires off. It's important to remember, or at least I assume it's important to remember, which wire goes to which one. The two blacks in this case go to the left, or the left looking at it from above, and the two whites are on the right hand side. So I've just got my little common screwdriver in there. Take those wires off. Now remember, again, de-energize this thing, because these wires and the amount of current and voltage that your well pump uses, it's definitely enough to fuck you up. So don't mess with this. Absolutely turn off your breaker. You know, cut power. If you're not familiar with how to cut power, or you don't feel comfortable doing a job like this because you're not, you don't know a whole lot about electricity, then maybe it is best to leave it to a professional. But it is an easy job as long as you pay attention and you make sure that you take the necessary safety precautions, because you're working with not just electricity here, but also water, right? So as we all know, electricity and water, they don't mix particularly well. So just be very careful to de-energize this circuit before you start working on it. I can't say that enough, because, not that I would ever be held liable, but if one of you guys decides, oh hey, I'm gonna work on my own electrical system here because I saw a YouTube video, and then, oh shit, I got electrocuted, and then you try to blame me for some reason, I'll be able to look back and say, well, hey, look, right in the video, it tells them don't do that. Leave it to the professionals if you're uncomfortable or if you're incompetent. This is a little bit tricky. There's kind of a nut in the back here that holds the wires into these holes. I'll show you once I get it out what it looks like. Undo the ground. Now this system is really well grounded. Just like me. Okay. So inside, what you're dealing with, you've got this here, this little clamp. It just clamps the wires. But on the inside of the switch, and I'm going to keep these parts because they don't come with the new switch, inside there you're going to have a little metal wall of your switch, and then this threads on, and it just holds this little, cuff link in place to keep your wires from moving around. I'm just going to kind of quickly assemble them so that the pieces don't go anywhere. And I'll take off the other one. The longest part of this job is just getting ready to do the job, getting the water drained and all that stuff. Actually removing the switch and installing the new one, that's the easy part. I'm just keeping all the old screws, because even though this switch may not be any good, it still has a whole bunch of perfectly good screws. This collar here that I mentioned, it's got little teeth on it, so if you're not able to unscrew it by hand. You can use a tool like a screwdriver and just kind of bite onto the little teeth on the collar so that you got something to grab onto and you can get it out. I'm just getting a little tangled here. There we go. Come on now, there we go. So that's gonna come out here. Oh, it's tangled again. These wires are a little bit on the stiff side. They're pretty heavy gauge wire. So you may find they get caught on stuff and give you a hard time. Just gonna tuck that out of the way. So there, now the switch is all exposed. We'll get our 19mm wrench onto it. Now, I also brought a clamp because this thing is sitting down kind of low in here, and I don't want it rotating while I try to loosen this, but it probably will anyway. I don't know, we'll see. Oh, on there pretty good. I guess I tightened it on there really well last time. Oh. Okay. Yeah, it's just doing the same thing it did before. So it's just going to come out as one piece. It's not ideal, but it's fine. Now there's a bit of air hissing out of here, and there kind of shouldn't be. So I feel like something going on with my tank. So this is supposed to have a diaphragm in it. Obviously the diaphragm on mine is leaking. So what I'm going to do, once I replace this switch, I'll have to re-inflate this tank again, which is going to be a huge pain in the ass because I just did a gigantic workout trying to remove it. Okay, now that's just spraying disgusting water everywhere. Wow, that's really gross. Wow, that is super fucking gross. Oh, that's nasty. Okay, so I got muddy, I think it might be rust. So I got kind of like muddy shit water all over my hands here. But I've got to separate these pieces because the new switch doesn't come with this little rod. That did not go as planned. Okay, so after a trip to my garage, I got this shaft piece off, and it just goes on the new switch like so. It just threads in. And then the new switch with the shaft piece is going to thread in to the original hole. Mine's got a bunch of gunk in it, so I'm going to just kind of pick some of that out. There we go. And that's just going to thread right in there. Don't worry about tightening it just yet, but we will obviously tighten it. Keep on going. Now just remember the orientation of this, because remember when I took the old one off, it was in this position. So we want to rotate this as much as we can by hand, and then we'll tighten it into position using the wrench. taking the cap off of it here. Hopefully we'll be able to get this all the way around again. I don't know. I might have just... Okay. I think we're good. Alright. So, we got that. I got that lined up. Now we're going to reinstall the wires. Oh. This didn't quite go as planned, but it's good for you to see this video because you can get an idea of some of the many things that can go wrong. First, you may have issues draining the tank, and then you may have issues with brown shit water spraying all over you. There's no limit when it comes to the issues you may run into when you're maintaining your own stuff. But the important issue not to run into is electrocuting yourself to death. At least we haven't done that. That would be, well, make for one hell of a YouTube video. So I'm just going to loosen up all these screws where the connectors go. I suppose the good news is that brown water that came out doesn't smell like shit. So I think it's just rust or maybe even just dirt from the well. I guess it was maybe accumulating in the bottom of the tank. I don't know. It's kind of gross either way, but I guess it could be worse. At least it's not like sewage water or it doesn't have any weird smells. It doesn't smell like anything, it's just brown water. I've got lots of filters in the house, so none of that weird gross water gets through to me, but it is interesting to see it all come flying out of here at a high pressure when I loosened off that switch. I'm going to eventually need a new one of these tanks, I guess, since mine doesn't seem to want to hold pressure. They're not supposed to launch. Well, there's supposed to be a diaphragm inside so that, you know, even if this thing wasn't hooked up at all, you could still pressurize that tank and you could install it later. In fact, they come from the factory pre-pressurized at 28 psi or whatever the case may be. So they're not supposed to do that. There must be a leak in the diaphragm in mine. So that's going to require replacement, but it should still work. I'm just going to have to, as long as it'll hold pressure, which it seemed like it was. I didn't hear any leaks or anything before I unscrewed this. So what I'll do is I'll get all this back together so it's a sealed system again, and then I'll just have to recharge this, I guess, and we'll go from there. Hopefully this will maintain its own, it'll maintain its own pressure, hopefully. Oh, feet are getting sore here. I'm kind of crunched up under the stairs. Luckily for me, I'm not that big of a person. If you're a big motherfucker, you might not want to do this, depending on where your system is located, because it is not a comfy spot under here, even for a small fellow like myself. So word to the wise, this is just a little tip. It's always a smart idea to hook up your grounds first. That's just because you never know. Obviously we've discharged this circuit, but there's always that chance that you did something wrong. You want to have yourself or your system grounded before you apply any sort of power to it. And that's pretty much true of any electrical system. You always want to make sure that you got it grounded out for safety before you put any power to it. I find this switch system here to be a little bit primitive, but it gets the job done. I'd like to, because this is the problem that I run into with these switches, is that my contacts burn up. I don't know if I'm just buying cheap switches or what, but the electrical contacts on mine, they have a tendency to burn up. And then they start making worse and worse contact with themselves until, eventually the damn things, they just kind of sputter out and my water dies. So it would be nice if I could rig up something with a relay so that these switches in here only deal with low current sort of thing. They're not getting the maximum power, and then run the relay somewhere else, and the relay will deal with the actual maximum power. That would be ideal, I think, and I don't really know why they don't do it that way, but I guess just because this is simple, right? So if you just want to keep your system as simple as possible, you run full power through the switch. Normally that's kind of frowned upon in most systems. You don't want to run full power just right through the switch. You want to use a relay, but in any case, it does work, and people have been running wells like this for the better part of a century. So I don't imagine it's going to change anytime soon. It would be nice to know if there was another option. Now this area here where I'm working kind of sucks. But if you can get this threaded, I think I just did. There you go. Yeah. Sure. Okay. That's gonna have to do. So we'll just put a little tighten up here. Sure, there we go. Alright. We're getting there. Now we'll just hook up our ground on this side. Like I said, this area to work in, not great. Not great. I've got pretty good dexterity and I'm able to work upside down and at weird angles, but some people are not so lucky, and this is one of those areas where you would really be dropping screws or whatever if you don't have lots of practice doing this kind of thing. Okay, that is ground. But as you can see, this is shit simple, right? Like, there's 2 white wires and 2 ground wires. There's nothing at all complicated about this system. So once I get this put back together, I'm gonna pressurize that tank again, which means another fucking half an hour of pumping that bicycle pump. Sweat my bag off in here. But once that's done and the system is pressurized, then I'll reapply power to this so the system can, or the you know, the water can pump itself back up. Oh. And then we'll go from there. I'm just hoping that my little tank here will hold pressure, in spite of the fact that it's clearly got something wrong with it. But the air should stay on top of the water once it's full of water. So as long as I don't empty it, the pressure should stay in it. You know what I mean? Oh, almost stabbed myself in the hand. Need a little bit of a small screwdriver. There we go. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4 connected, 2 grounds connected. Wires are good. Okay. So now we're back to this point. So I'm going to re-inflate this with 25, 27-ish PSI, and then I'll turn the camera off or on after that, and we'll watch it work. Alright, so we're back here. I've got the tank re-inflated. I've got all the valves closed, so we're not losing any pressure right now. Everything is as it should be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the wall breaker, and we're going to watch for smoke first of all. Hopefully I didn't hook it up wrong, or we'll explode. But I'm pretty sure I got it right. It wasn't very complicated. My breaker's just right here on the wall. Now these switches have a low pressure cutoff, and it's operated by this little lever right here. So all you gotta do, and it shows you this right on here, I don't know if you can see this, but auto is down. Start, you lift it up to start it, and then you can turn it all the way if you want to shut it off permanently. But all I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get her started. Here we go. So it's starting, building up pressure now, and once it builds up to where it thinks it should be, the switch will kick off. And then I'm going to open up the system so that the water can go through the rest of the house. But I'm going to do that slowly because I don't want this to drop off. I don't want the air that's in this tank. There, it kicked off. We're showing 50 PSI here. That's about where we should be. So I'm going to slowly trickle this into the house. And this will start to go decrease pressure on here. And as the pressure goes throughout the house, that switch should kick back on. As you can see, I just want to do it slowly. I don't want to shock the system. But right around 30 PSI, this switch should kick back on. So just keeping an eye on the switch here, or on the pressure on the gauge. We may never reach 30, but we'll see. I don't think we're going to reach 30. I don't think we're going to go down that far. But that's alright. Because right now we know this is working. Or it should be working anyway. I'll go turn on a tap somewhere else in the house, and the pressure will come down, and then this switch should kick right back on. There. Now the water is fully open to the house. We're above 40 PSI. I'm going to go try one of my taps. And once I get it running, you should see the switch kick on again. And then that's it. All we'll be doing after that is installing this cover. And then we're good to go. Well, you're good to go. I got to spend the next however long cleaning up all this poopy spray water that went everywhere. So I'll be back. You keep an eye on this switch, and you should see it kick on once the pressure drops down. like I got here just in time. It just kicked on. I heard it click and I can see it engaged. And then once the water pressure reaches about 50, it should jump back off again. There it goes. So it's working perfectly. Way better than it did before. It was chattering before, and I think it may have been a combination of the switch being old and worn out, and also this pressure tank. With no pressure in it, it takes almost nothing for the water to go from 30 psi to 50 psi. So the switch was constantly kicking on and off, on and off, on and off, and wearing it out prematurely. So as long as this tank holds pressure, which I'm hoping it will, and as long as this switch doesn't burn the contacts up, this setup should last me quite a while longer, even with this tank having a diaphragm that may not be perfect. So thanks for watching my video. If you enjoyed it, I hope you click like and subscribe. I do videos like this as often as I can. Whenever something comes up that needs to be fixed, I like to record it and teach people how I fixed it, so they can save money instead of hiring a plumber for a job like this where it takes a couple hours, and that's what, $100 an hour. It would have been several $100s, where I just spent 40 bucks on that part and that's it.